Federal Reserve and Chair Powell said yesterday that the problem here is this massive gap between supply and demand. Like you mentioned earlier, these COVID lockdowns in China and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that's really hitting the supply side, but the Fed can't really do much about that, right? That's just a massive geopolitical issue, the COVID issues, but they can really affect demand, and that's what they're doing here, right? Raising interest rates and making loans and borrowing more expensive. That's an effort to sort of rein in all the massive spending that we've seen over the past year. And that's really all that spending has really driven this massive gap in supply and demand. And that's been fueling the inflation that we've been seeing now for really the past several months.
Well, right. And when Biden touts his deficit reduction, right, what we're actually talking about here is just the fact that we're not spending, we don't have a massive COVID spending package, and also that he wasn't able to get through Congress a lot of the spending he wanted to get through. So it's right. Am I missing something there? It's kind of weird, I think, to brag about because Congress stopped you, denied you from doing what you want. Now we're actually reduced the deficit, but that wasn't by intention.
Right. I mean, yeah. When Joe Manchin gives you lemons, you make reducing the deficit lemonade, I guess. It is a more positive way to put it. And I'd also say, back in early in the Biden presidency, when they passed the latest stimulus bill, the 1.9 trillion stimulus package, there's a lot of opposition from Republicans saying, this is just going to boost inflation, right? We don't need more aid. The economy is healing. We have COVID vaccines rolling out right now. This support isn't needed. And sure enough, yeah, we've seen inflation surge since. Now, it's not solely because of the stimulus package. We've had these supply chain issues. We've had new waves of COVID since. But this is Biden in a sense saying, yes, inflation is really high, but we're now working toward trimming down the deficit and sort of giving the counter to what happened back when the stimulus was passed. Now the Fed and the Biden administration are both shifting toward more austere measures, kind of reining in all that cash that was flowing into the economy earlier in the pandemic.
So, but on one hand, there is this desire to raise interest rates to basically lower demand. On the other hand, you have these conversations about price caps on specific goods like gasoline, which have become really, it's a good that has become very politicized in the context of this election year. Is this a kind of circular policy making? Is there a principle in effect in talking about price caps out of one side of your mouth and then raising interest rates on the other?
I think it's two sort of different sides of the same inflation problem. Like on one hand, yes, there are all these talks about how can we lower gas prices, especially going into the midterms, right, where Democrats are trying to alleviate this inflation problem, or at least show they're doing that as best they can. We've heard about the gas tax holiday as a potential idea. Biden has released some crude oil from the strategic reserves that we have here. Allies have been doing that as well abroad. But at the end of the day, that doesn't solve that's more of a Band-Aid, right, to this problem. It doesn't solve the inherent gap that we have in the amount of oil that's hitting the market and how much demand there is for that oil. Especially with COVID cases at relative lows, people are out traveling, acting like or behaving like the worst of the pandemic is behind us, and it is. But there's all this demand for travel, for driving, for traveling around, and we just don't have the supply now. And so what the Fed is doing, that's a more long-term move. Try to lower demand, not just offering a temporary aid through lower prices, but actually lowering demand in that equation that's been driving inflation higher.